At the end of Chapter 3, I promised you the hard case. Here it is. For this whole series, the satellite basically stayed put, geostationary, hanging over the same spot on Earth. But a low Earth satellite does the opposite. It races across the sky, crossing from horizon to horizon in just a few minutes, moving at nearly 8 kilometers every second. The satellite you're connected to is only overhead for a moment before it sets, and the next one takes over. Everything we built, the timing, the Doppler, the sync, now changes by the second. This is low Earth orbit, described in 3GPP's study TR38821 as scenarios C and D. Let's see why it's the hard one. Let's get concrete about the orbit. A low Earth satellite for 5G sits around 600 kilometers up, sometimes 1,200, compared to a geostationary satellite at nearly 36,000. Being roughly 60 times closer has one gorgeous payoff: latency. The round trip to a 600-kilometer satellite is only about 25 milliseconds, against more than 500 at GEO. That is a different universe for anything interactive. But there's a price. To stay in orbit that low, the satellite has to move incredibly fast, roughly 7.5 kilometers per second, circling the whole Earth in about 90 minutes. From where you stand, it rises, crosses the sky, and sets, all in a handful of minutes. So low Earth orbit gives you fantastic latency and a much easier link budget. But the entire geometry between you and the satellite is changing continuously. And that motion is the source of every hard problem in this chapter. These figures come from the 3GPP study TR38821. Now the signature problem of low Earth orbit, Doppler. You've heard it with a passing ambulance. The pitch drops as it goes by. A satellite screaming across the sky does exactly this to your radio signal, but far more violently. At GEO, the Doppler shift is almost nothing, under 1 part per million. At 600 kilometers, it can reach around 24 parts per million, and worse, it changes fast, flipping from a strong positive shift to a strong negative one as the satellite passes overhead. If the radio didn't correct for this, the signal would drift right out of its channel. The fix reuses a tool we already know. Your phone knows its own position from GNSS, and it knows exactly where the satellite is and how fast it's moving from the ephemeris broadcast in SIB19. So it calculates the Doppler and pre-compensates before transmitting. That ephemeris, defined in 3GPP TS 38331, is doing double duty, timing and frequency. Here's the choice that defines low Earth NTN, what happens to the cell on the ground. There are two philosophies. In the first, Earth-moving cells, the satellite just points its beams straight down and keeps them fixed to itself. So the coverage footprint slides across the ground at 7.5 kilometers per second. The cell literally sweeps over you like a searchlight. In 3GPP's scenarios, that's C2 and D2. In the second, the satellite is smarter. It steers its beam to hold the footprint on a fixed patch of ground for a while compensating for its own motion, then jumps to the next patch. From your phone's point of view, the cell sits still for a period, then moves. 3GPP even gives this a name, a quasi-earth-fixed cell, defined in TS 38304. Those are scenarios C1 and D1. This single choice, moving cells versus quasi-fixed cells, drives everything about how mobility works in the next chapter. Hold that thought. Because the cell is always on the move, an idle phone faces a constant question: is there a better cell now? On the ground, you might reselect every few minutes. Under a low Earth satellite, the answer can change every few seconds. But measuring neighbors non-stop would drain your battery fast. And remember, your phone is already burning power, keeping a GNSS fix alive. So Release 17 adds two clever triggers, broadcast in SIB19, that tell the phone when it's actually worth measuring. The first is location-based. Don't bother measuring until your distance from the cell's reference location grows past a threshold, called distance thresh. The second is time-based. Each cell advertises how long it will keep serving your area. It's T-service, so the phone starts looking for a successor just before that runs out. Both rules are defined in TS 38304, Clause 5.2.4.2. Instead of measuring blindly, the phone measures exactly when the geometry says it should. There's one more consequence of all this motion. Everything expires faster. Back in Chapter 2, we saw that the satellite's ephemeris and timing come with an expiry anchored to a moment called epoch time, and valid only for a window called the NTN sync validity duration. At GEO, that window is comfortable, the geometry barely moves. In low Earth orbit, the same information goes stale in a flash, because the satellite's position and velocity are changing every second. So the phone rereads SIB-19 and re-anchors its timing and frequency far more often. A fast, relentless refresh loop just to stay locked on. Same mechanism as Chapter 2F, defined in TS 38-331, but now running on a much tighter clock. Speed buys you latency, biasi, and charges you in constant upkeep, so that's low Earth orbit. Getting close to the Earth buys you two beautiful things: low latency, around 25 milliseconds, and a far kinder link budget. But you pay for that closeness with speed. The satellite races overhead, so you inherit heavy Doppler, cells that either sweep across the ground or hold on briefly then jump, constant cell reselection, and timing that expires in seconds. Every one of those maps to a real Release 17 mechanism, broadcast in SIB-19. And it leaves one giant problem unsolved. If a satellite only serves you for a few minutes, then even sitting perfectly still, your phone must hand over again and again. How 5G survives that is the next chapter. NTN handover. Subscribe to RANspace.